The world was on the brink of collapse. It had been years since humanity had made any real progress. Their enemies, once seen as allies, had turned against them, and the human race found itself isolated. After countless wars and betrayals, Earth was now a forgotten world in the vast universe. There were no more allies, no more friends, just an endless stretch of hostile space. Humanity's once proud cities were now ruins. The cities that remained were only shadows of their former selves. People lived in fear, always looking over their shoulders, afraid of what would come next. Earth was a dying planet, and there seemed to be no way out. Every day felt like a struggle to survive, and hope seemed like a distant memory. The governments of Earth had done everything they could. They sent out distress signals, hoping someone would hear them. But no one came. The universe seemed to have forgotten humanity entirely. The once bright future of the human race had faded to darkness. It was in this hopeless moment that one last, desperate signal was sent into the stars. It wasn't just any signal, it was a plea for help. A cry for mercy. The message was sent in every language, every frequency, every possible way the humans knew how to reach out. It was an attempt to call for help, a final chance at survival. But after sending the message, Earth's people could do nothing but wait. Days passed. Then weeks. Then months. The message sent, but no reply came. The silence was deafening. The humans who still dared to hope began to give up. They couldn't even remember the last time they heard a voice outside their own planet. Was there anyone out there? Or had they truly been forgotten? It was on the edge of despair that something unexpected happened. A signal returned. At first, it was weak, faint, almost like a whisper in the dark. But it grew clearer as the seconds passed. The voice that answered was not one of pity. It was not kind, nor did it offer hope. The message was simple. Cold. You have no idea what you're asking for. The words echoed across the empty chambers of Earth's communication hubs. The humans who heard it were left in stunned silence. Who had sent the message? And what did it mean? Was this the help they had been waiting for? Or was it something far worse? For hours, no one could make sense of it. Earth's leaders tried to track the source, but it was unlike any technology they had ever encountered. The transmission came from somewhere deep in space, from a place no one could identify. Then, without warning, the signal came again. This time, it was much clearer. It was an instruction. A set of coordinates. The message was simple: meet us here. The coordinates pointed to a distant part of the galaxy, a place no human had ever been. The message came with one final, chilling note: come alone. What did it mean? Why alone? Was this a trap? Was this a trick to lure them to their doom? Or was it humanity's last chance for survival? The people of Earth didn't know, but they had no choice. The Deathworlders had responded. The humans were left with no option but to prepare for the journey. What lay beyond the coordinates was unknown. All they had were the coordinates, the cryptic message, and a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, this mysterious force would be their salvation. As the leaders gathered to make a decision, one thought lingered in their minds: they had to go. They had no other choice. If they didn't, humanity would be lost forever. But one thing was clear: this wasn't the kind of rescue they had imagined. The Deathworlders were coming, and nothing would ever be the same again. The journey to the coordinates was a long and treacherous one. For months, the humans had prepared. They gathered resources, studied the mysterious transmission, and made the final decision to send a small fleet toward the unknown. The world held its breath as the fleet entered the coordinates, knowing they were on the edge of something that could either save them or wipe them out entirely. As the fleet traveled farther from Earth, the silence of space seemed to swallow everything around them. No one spoke much. Everyone knew the risks. The leaders were haunted by doubt, but they couldn't turn back now. The coordinates led them to an uncharted star system, one that was completely outside the reach of any human exploration. But as they approached, something strange began to happen. The vast emptiness of space suddenly felt alive. A massive ship appeared out of nowhere, looming in the distance. It was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. The ship wasn't sleek and shiny like the ones the humans had built. No, this ship was rugged, dark, and terrifying, like something from a nightmare. It looked like it had been built to survive the most brutal environments in the universe. The human fleet tried to make contact, but the strange ship didn't respond. Instead, it simply moved closer, an enormous shadow in the sky. The humans were forced to dock on it, their ship dwarfed by the immense size of the Deathworlders' vessel. As they disembarked, they saw the Deathworlders for the first time. They weren't like anything the humans had imagined. Towering over them, with massive muscles and rough, battle-worn faces, the Deathworlders looked every bit the part of a warlord race. Their bodies were covered in scars, and their eyes burned with a cold, calculating intensity. The humans had imagined them to be cruel or hostile, but as they made their way off the ship, the Deathworlders did not strike fear into them immediately. Instead, the silence of the ship seemed to overwhelm them. It wasn't an atmosphere of violence, it was one of something far more dangerous, discomfort. The Deathworlders simply observed. They didn't speak at first, letting the humans adjust to their surroundings. The humans were confused, had they been brought here just to die, or was this some kind of twisted game? The warriors' silence was oppressive. Every move they made felt like it was being watched, and yet, the humans couldn't help but feel a strange sense of urgency building within them. It was almost like the Deathworlders were waiting for something. One of the human commanders, a young woman named Captain Elena, stepped forward. She spoke hesitantly at first, but her voice grew more certain with each word. "We're here for help," she said. "We need your guidance. Our world is dying, and we—" Before she could finish, one of the Deathworlders stepped forward, his voice gruff and booming, "You don't need our guidance. You need strength." The humans were taken aback. What did that mean? What kind of help was this? But there was no time to question it. The Deathworlder continued, his words cutting through the air like a blade. "You are weak. We will make you strong. If you survive, then you'll be worthy." The humans, confused and intimidated, glanced at each other. They had no idea what this meant. Was survival even possible? Could they become strong enough to survive whatever these creatures had in mind? The Deathworlders began to move quickly, as if the conversation was over. Without warning, the humans were pulled into intense combat training. The Deathworlders didn't explain much. They just made them fight. No breaks. No hesitation. No mercy. For hours, the humans struggled against each other, learning new combat tactics, new survival skills. They were tested in ways they never thought possible. There were no rest periods, and the only rule was, survive. Each moment felt like a test of their very willpower. And every time they failed, the Deathworlders only pushed harder. The humans were exhausted, their bodies aching, but they didn't dare show weakness. They had no choice. Captain Elena, struggling to keep up with the relentless training, collapsed during one of the drills. But instead of the Deathworlders showing mercy, they simply stood over her, watching as she caught her breath. One of them spoke again, this time softer. "If you cannot survive here, you will die out there. Do you want to survive?" Elena nodded, sweat dripping from her forehead. "I do," she gasped. The Deathworlder grinned, a terrifying smile on his scarred face. "Then rise. The real test begins tomorrow." As the humans struggled through the brutal training, they began to understand something. The Deathworlders weren't here to babysit them or offer them pity. They had come to teach them one thing, survival. And no one, no matter how strong or weak, would be spared from that lesson. The Deathworlders' world was harsh, unforgiving, and they would not stop until the humans were strong enough to survive it. Whether they wanted to or not, they had no choice but to adapt or die. The human race had made the first step towards something far darker and more dangerous than they could ever imagine. But as they faced the brutal training, one thought lingered: would they be strong enough? Or would they be the next to fall? The days on the Deathworlders ship felt like weeks. The relentless training pushed humanity to its breaking point, and yet, there was no stopping it. Every morning, the humans were thrust into more difficult trials, each one harder than the last. Sleep had become a luxury, food was scarce, and water was even more so. Yet, despite the exhaustion and pain, there was something inside them that refused to give up. They had come too far to turn back now. The Deathworlders were watching, evaluating. Captain Elena had never been one for physical challenges. She was a leader, a tactician, not a soldier. But in the brutal training grounds of the Deathworlders ship, she had no choice but to adapt. The exercises were unforgiving: hand-to-hand combat, endurance runs, and simulations where they fought against alien creatures more terrifying than anything Earth had ever known. The Deathworlders were relentless in their assessments. Every failure was met with silence and then an even harsher test. The humans quickly learned that there was no trying in the eyes of the Deathworlders, there was only doing or dying. But as the days went by, Elena and the others started to notice something strange. The Deathworlders weren't just pushing them to their limits, they were testing them in a way that went beyond physical strength. They were testing their spirit, their will to survive. One afternoon, after a grueling hand-to-hand combat drill that left Elena bruised and bleeding, the Deathworlders gathered the humans together. The leader of the Deathworlders, a towering figure known as Krex, stood before them. His eyes were as cold as the depths of space, his expression unreadable. "You have fought. You have endured," Krex's voice boomed across the room. "But strength alone does not make you worthy. You must prove your worth." Elena stood among the others, panting, unsure of what he meant. Worthy of what? Of survival? Of a place among the Deathworlders? She wasn't sure, but she knew one thing for certain: this was no longer just about physical strength. This was about something deeper, something that none of them had fully understood yet. Krex continued. "You must face the trial of the desolate lands. This trial will test your resolve, your courage, your mind, and your ability to adapt. Fail, and you will never leave this ship." The humans were stunned. The trial of the desolate lands? What did that mean? No one had mentioned such a trial before. But there was no time for questions. Krex gestured, and the humans were led to a different part of the ship. What they found was unlike anything they had ever seen. A massive chamber, so vast it felt like they were standing on an alien planet. The air was thin, dry, and filled with the smell of something metallic. And the floor, cracked, barren, and desolate, was nothing like the smooth surface of the ship they had become accustomed to. "This is the desolate lands," Krex said, his voice carrying a note of finality. "You will be dropped in different locations across this barren world. Your objective is simple: survive for 72 hours. The challenge? You will be hunted." The humans stared in disbelief. Hunt? They were to be hunted like prey. The Deathworlders seemed to take pleasure in their confusion, but Krex's face remained stone cold. "You will have nothing but your wits and what little you can find. No weapons, no help. Only your survival instincts. If you survive, then you will have earned your place among us." With that, the humans were separated and dropped into the simulated landscape. The ground was harsh, the terrain unforgiving. A constant wind whipped through the desolate world, carrying strange, haunting sounds. The air was thin, making each breath feel like a struggle. And all around them, unseen eyes were watching. Elena found herself in the middle of a vast desert. The sun beat down on her, but there was no shade in sight. She felt the weight of exhaustion creeping in already. She had no idea where the others were or what they were facing. All she knew was that she had to survive. Her first instinct was to find shelter. She stumbled through the rocky terrain, searching for any sign of cover. But the more she walked, the more she realized something horrifying: there was nothing. This was a place designed to break people, to test how far they could be pushed before they crumbled. And soon, Elena felt herself doing exactly that. Her body ached from the exertion of the training. Her mind screamed for rest, for relief. But she couldn't stop. Hours passed. She scavenged what she could, but the land offered nothing. The fear began to creep in. What was waiting for her? Were the Deathworlders watching her struggle, waiting for her to fail? It didn't matter. Elena couldn't afford to think about that. She needed to focus. Then, in the distance, she spotted something moving. A shadow. At first, she thought it was her mind playing tricks, but as she squinted, she saw it again. It was a creature, large, fast, and menacing. She realized in that instant that the trial was no joke. She was truly being hunted. The creature drew closer, its eyes gleaming with hunger. Elena's heart raced, and panic set in. She had no weapon, no defense. Just her instincts and the will to survive. She ran. She ran as fast as she could, her breath ragged, her legs burning with the effort. But the creature was faster, gaining on her with every step. Just when she thought she couldn't run any further, she found a rock formation. It wasn't much, but it was something, a chance. She dove behind it, hiding in the shadows, praying the creature wouldn't find her. But her body was shaking. She could feel the presence of the creature just on the other side of the rock. It was waiting. Elena's mind raced. This was it. She had to survive, she had to make it through this trial. And as the creature's shadow loomed closer, she realized that the only way to survive was not by brute strength or weapons, it was by outsmarting her enemy. The game had changed. Now, it was about who could adapt faster. Who could survive without help. The Deathworlders were watching, and they weren't going to make it easy. As the creature paused, sniffing the air, Elena held her breath. The game had begun. The 72 hours in the desolate lands had passed in a blur of fear, exhaustion, and desperation. Elena had barely managed to survive the brutal trial, using every ounce of her wit to outsmart the creatures that hunted her. But survival was only half the battle. As she crawled back toward the safety zone marked by the Deathworlders, her mind raced. What would happen next? Had she earned her place among them? Or had she merely become another failed experiment? The humans who had survived the trial were gathered together, looking ragged and broken, but there was a flicker of something in their eyes. Something new. They had been tested in ways they never imagined, and now they stood before the Deathworlders, who remained as stoic as ever. Krex, the towering leader of the Deathworlders, stood in front of them, his gaze sweeping over the humans who had made it through. "You have survived," he said, his voice deep and echoing. "But surviving is not enough. Now you must prove your worth in the true battle." Elena's heart raced. What did that mean? The true battle? Were they to fight the Deathworlders themselves? Or was there something even more terrifying waiting for them? Before she could ask, Krex turned and gestured for the humans to follow him. The group was led into a massive hangar, the walls lined with enormous war machines and alien weapons. The air felt charged with tension. This was different from the brutal trials they had faced so far. This was no longer about testing their endurance or strength. This was about war. In the center of the hangar stood a massive display screen. Krex approached it and activated it with a single command. The screen flickered to life, showing the images of an alien fleet. These ships were larger and more menacing than any the humans had ever seen, each one bristling with weaponry. "The enemy is coming," Krex said coldly. "A fleet from the Ithal Dominion, a race bent on exterminating every species they encounter. They are not just here to invade, they are here to wipe us out." The humans stared at the screen in disbelief. They had heard of the Ithal before, a terrifying species known for their merciless conquest of entire star systems. But they never imagined they would face them head-on. They had barely survived their trials, and now they were expected to fight in a war against such a formidable force. You will fight alongside us, Krex continued. Your survival depends on it. Your future depends on it. If you are to become worthy of being our allies, you must prove yourselves now. This is your test. The Deathworlders didn't hesitate. They immediately began preparing, donning their heavy armor and grabbing their weapons. The humans were handed basic gear, nothing special compared to the Deathworlders' equipment, but it was something. Elena could barely contain her nerves. She was no soldier. She had barely survived the trials. But now, with an entire alien fleet bearing down on them, there was no room for fear. There was only action. Krex turned to her as she struggled to equip herself. This will be your first battle. Do not think, just act. Trust your instincts, trust your training. The words were simple, but Elena felt their weight. Trust your instincts. Before they could prepare any further, the alarms blared. The Ithal fleet had arrived, faster than expected. The ship shook violently as the Deathworlders' vessel engaged its defensive systems. Elena's heart pounded in her chest, but she fought to steady her breathing. This was it. With Krex leading the charge, the Deathworlders and humans rushed to the battle stations. The atmosphere in the hangar turned electric, charged with tension and adrenaline. Elena was assigned to a small team of human soldiers, each one wearing a mixture of fear and resolve on their faces. They were outnumbered and under-equipped, but they had no choice. They had to fight. The first wave of enemy ships arrived, their massive forms appearing on the screens. The Ithal ships began launching missiles at them. The humans and Deathworlders scrambled to take position as the ship's guns fired in return. The explosions were deafening, and the ship rocked with each impact. Elena's hands trembled as she held her weapon, but her mind was focused. The Deathworlders fought with precision, tearing through the enemy's defenses like a hot knife through butter. Their tactics were brutal but effective. Elena's team was struggling to keep up. She had no experience in space combat, no knowledge of how to manage the ship's weapons or engage with the alien forces. "Captain," one of her teammates shouted. "We need you on the front lines." There was no time to think. Elena grabbed a heavy rifle and ran toward the front, determined to contribute in any way she could. The Ithal ships were closing in fast, and soon they would board the Deathworlder vessel. The humans had to hold their ground, or die trying. The first wave of Ithal soldiers boarded the ship, and chaos erupted. They were massive, their bodies covered in black armor, and their eyes gleamed with a terrifying red hue. Their weapons were unlike anything the humans had ever seen, energy blades that could cut through steel like butter. The battle was savage. Death came quickly, but so did victory. As Elena fought beside the Deathworlders, she realized something: the Deathworlders didn't care about the numbers. They didn't care about the odds. They fought for survival, for the honor of their species. Their world was harsh, their lives brutal. But they had one thing that set them apart from the rest of the galaxy: a drive to fight back no matter the cost. Elena could feel the fire building inside her. She wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting for something bigger, for humanity's place in the galaxy. With each enemy soldier she cut down, she felt the weight of the Deathworlders' training on her shoulders. She had survived their trials. Now, she would prove herself on the battlefield. The battle raged on, but slowly, the tide began to turn. The Deathworlders were relentless. The humans, though inexperienced, had learned to adapt. They were starting to hold their ground. As Elena's rifle barked with every shot, she caught a glimpse of Krex, his figure moving through the chaos like a living weapon. He was everywhere, and the Ithal were slowly beginning to retreat. But Elena knew this was just the beginning. The true war had only begun, and humanity would need every ounce of strength to survive. And so, as the enemy fleet began to falter, the humans and Deathworlders fought side by side, knowing one thing for certain: they were not alone anymore. The battle had raged for what felt like an eternity. The Ithal Dominion's forces had come in waves, their numbers overwhelming and their weapons devastating. But the Deathworlders fought with unmatched ferocity, their warrior spirit turning the tide of battle in their favor. Elena had fought alongside them, pushing her limits beyond anything she ever imagined. She was no longer the unsure captain who had arrived on their ship, unsure of what lay ahead. Now, she had become a warrior in her own right, battle-hardened, relentless, and willing to sacrifice everything for the survival of her people. The enemy fleet, once imposing and terrifying, was beginning to falter. The Deathworlder weapons, powerful and precise, had torn through the Ithal ships one by one, forcing them into retreat. But as the last enemy ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, the silence that followed was deafening. The sound of the battle ceased, leaving only the ringing in Elena's ears and the deep, steady thrum of the ship's engines. The humans and Deathworlders stood together in the aftermath, covered in the grime and blood of battle. "We did it," Elena breathed, almost not believing the words as they left her lips. But Krex, the leader of the Deathworlders, stood tall, his expression unreadable. "This was only the first step," he said, his voice deep and commanding. "The Ithal will return. There will be more battles ahead. And the question remains, are you truly ready to fight?" Elena straightened, wiping the sweat from her brow, her body aching from the brutal combat. But she was ready. She had seen her people fight, seen them transform from fearful survivors to warriors. And now, standing beside the Deathworlders, she knew that humanity had earned its place in the galaxy. Krex's piercing gaze softened slightly. "You've proven yourselves. You are not like the other species we've encountered. You have fire inside you, and that fire is what makes you worthy. You've earned your place among us." The words struck Elena like a lightning bolt. They weren't just words of approval, they were an offer. An offer that had the power to change everything. "You are no longer just survivors," Krex continued. "You are now allies. And with our help, you will become a force to be reckoned with. We will fight together, side by side. This galaxy is vast, and there are threats that you cannot even begin to comprehend. But together, we stand a chance." Elena's mind raced as the reality of Krex's words sank in. She had come to this place as a desperate leader, asking for help to save her people. But what she had found was far greater. Humanity had not only been saved, they had been chosen. The Deathworlders were not just warriors, they were survivors of a harsh, unforgiving universe, and they had recognized humanity's potential. Elena glanced around at her fellow humans, each one marked by the trials they had endured. They had passed the test, but now, they had a new challenge before them, one that would shape the future of the human race. Krex gestured for Elena and the others to follow him as he led them to a new chamber within the ship. It was larger than anything they had seen before, built to accommodate not just the Deathworlders but the humans who would now be part of their battle-hardened alliance. The walls were adorned with strange, alien symbols, each one representing a different victory, a different battle fought. Elena realized that this was a hall of honor, a place reserved for the most respected warriors among the Deathworlders. The chamber was filled with the sounds of low conversations, as the Deathworlders discussed strategies and battle plans. But as Elena and the other humans entered, there was a brief pause, a moment of recognition. The Deathworlders nodded to them, acknowledging their place in this world of war and survival. Krex stood before them, his voice steady and sure. "From this moment forward, you will no longer be called humans. You will be known as the Iron Alliance. You are forged in the fires of battle, and now, you stand alongside us. Together, we will fight the threats that no one else dares to face." Elena felt a surge of pride well up inside her as the words echoed through the room. The humans, her people, had earned their place, not just as survivors, but as true warriors in this vast and dangerous galaxy. The Deathworlders had shown them what it meant to fight, to survive, and to never back down in the face of impossible odds. But they had also shown them something else, a different way to live. A way where strength and honor were the foundation of existence. The Deathworlders didn't fight for power or control, they fought for the right to survive, for the right to exist in a universe that was indifferent to their struggles. And now, the humans had been invited into that world. As the Iron Alliance, humanity would face new challenges, new enemies, and new battles that would test them beyond anything they had ever known. But they would face them together, side by side with the Deathworlders, in a bond forged through blood, sweat, and fire. Elena turned to her fellow soldiers, their faces worn and tired but filled with resolve. They had come from a dying world, a world where hope was fading. But now, hope was alive again. It burned bright in their hearts, stronger than ever before. And as the Iron Alliance prepared for the next battle, Elena knew one thing for sure: humanity was no longer alone. The galaxy was vast, filled with dangers and mysteries, but humanity had found its place in the stars. They had earned their spot in the galactic family, and together, they would forge a future stronger than any single species could ever achieve alone. The journey had only just begun. And the Deathworlders had shown them the way. Together, they would conquer the stars.